The first time she opened her eyes, the world was nothing but warmth and light. Tiny paws pressed against her mother's side as she tried to find her place among her brothers and sisters. Outside the small countryside cottage, the air smelled of wet earth and spring rain. Inside, a fire crackled gently while soft human voices laughed nearby. She was the smallest of the litter, a golden cream Labrador whose ears drooped unevenly and whose tail never stopped wagging, even in her sleep. The family who owned her mother had been waiting for the day the pups would arrive. When they finally did, the children, two little girls named Sophie and Amelia, spent hours sitting by the basket, whispering names and giggling every time one of the pups yawned or sneezed. From the beginning, this particular pup had something different in her eyes. She wasn't the strongest, nor the loudest, but she looked at everyone as though she understood far more than a puppy should. The girls noticed it too. "She looks like she's listening," Sophie said one morning, rubbing her tiny head. "We should call her Daisy. She looks gentle, like a daisy." And that was how it began. Daisy, the Labrador who never gave up. The first months of her life were full of discovery. The back garden was her universe, a world of smells and adventures. She chased butterflies until she fell over her own paws, barked at dandelions, and slept under the apple tree with her belly rising and falling in the sunlight. When autumn came, leaves became her favorite toy. She would leap through piles of them, scattering gold and red across the garden, making the girls laugh until they fell down beside her. Her bond with the family grew naturally. The father, Mark, a postman, took her on early morning walks when mist still hugged the hedgerows. The mother, Claire, always kept an extra biscuit by the kettle for Daisy. "Not for me," she'd say with a smile. Every evening Daisy curled at their feet by the fire, content to simply exist among the people she adored. Life seemed perfect, but perfection rarely lasts forever. When Daisy turned 2, the family moved from the small village to a nearby town. The garden was smaller, the noise louder, and Mark's work hours grew longer. Still, Daisy adjusted, as dogs always do. She found comfort in routine, morning walks, evening cuddles, the rhythm of the house. But one winter something changed. Mark lost his job. Claire started working double shifts at the local care home. The laughter that once filled the house became quieter, the walks shorter, the treats fewer. Daisy didn't understand the words, only the tone, the tiredness in their voices, the way Sophie hugged her longer before school, or how Amelia whispered into her ear, "Don't worry, Daisy, it's just for a bit." Then one gray afternoon, Mark loaded Daisy into the back of the old car. Her tail thumped happily against the seat, unaware that anything was wrong. The countryside rolled past her eyes, familiar fields turning to woods and then to narrow lanes she didn't recognize. The car stopped near a farm road. Mark stepped out, calling her name softly. She leapt down, sniffing the crisp air, delighted. But when she turned around, the car door closed. He knelt and stroked her head, his eyes wet. "I'm sorry, girl," he whispered. "I'll come back, I promise." He climbed into the car, and before Daisy could react, the engine started. She chased after it, paws pounding on gravel, barking in confusion as the car grew smaller and smaller until all she could see were the red lights vanishing into fog. The silence that followed was heavy. The field around her was endless, wind brushing through the grass. Daisy sat there for a long time, waiting. The rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, but she didn't move. She believed he would return. That night she found shelter under an old barn. The smell of hay reminded her faintly of home. She curled into herself, trembling, ears twitching at every distant sound. Hunger arrived first, then loneliness. Yet even as the days turned into weeks, Daisy never stopped looking toward the road. Farmers sometimes saw her from a distance, sitting by the lane where cars passed. Some tried to call her over, but she stayed cautious, polite, wagging her tail once then retreating to the edge of the woods. She became a small legend among locals, the loyal dog who waited. Winter deepened. Frost glazed the fields white, and Daisy's breath puffed into mist as she searched for food. A kind woman from a nearby cottage began leaving bowls of water and scraps of bread. Daisy approached slowly each night, eating quietly, eyes flicking toward the road as though expecting a familiar engine's rumble. Weeks turned to months. Her once golden fur dulled with mud and rain, but her eyes still held that same soft intelligence. One evening, she heard laughter carried by the wind, the sound of children playing. Her tail lifted instinctively. Following the noise, she reached the edge of a small village where a boy about 10 was kicking a football against a wall. When he saw her, he froze. "Hey, girl," he whispered, holding the ball still. Daisy stayed where she was, uncertain. The boy knelt and reached out a piece of bread from his pocket. "You look hungry. It's okay. I won't hurt you." Caution battled with hunger. After a long pause, Daisy crept forward, took the bread gently, and backed away. The boy smiled. "You're a clever one. I'll bring more tomorrow." And he did. Every day after school, he came to the same spot with a bit of food. He called her Daisy without knowing that was already her name. Slowly, she began to trust him. Tail wagging, ears perked. One day he dared to touch her head, and she didn't flinch. The warmth of human touch after months of loneliness almost broke her heart. Still, each night, she returned to her post by the roadside. Loyalty is not something that fades easily in a Labrador's heart. Then came a storm unlike any other. Winds tore through the valley, trees bending, rain slashing sideways. Daisy huddled under the barn, frightened. Somewhere amid the noise, she heard a cry, a human cry. Without hesitation, she ran toward it. The boy had tried to rescue his football from the flooded stream and had slipped in. The current was fierce, dragging him downstream. Daisy sprinted through the mud, leapt into the icy water, and clamped her jaws around the boy's jacket. She kicked with every ounce of strength she had left, pulling him toward the bank. It was a battle between fear and instinct, but she never let go. By the time help arrived, Daisy and the boy were collapsed on the grass, both trembling but alive. His parents rushed over, stunned. "Whose dog is that?" the father asked. The boy, shivering, whispered, "She's mine now." The family took Daisy in that night, wrapped her in blankets, and fed her properly for the first time in months. They cleaned her fur, warmed her paws, and for the first time since that cold day by the road, Daisy closed her eyes and felt safe. But even then, as she drifted to sleep, her ears twitched at the faint memory of an engine, a promise whispered long ago. She hadn't given up on the world, but she still carried the hope that someday the man who left her would see her again. Not because she needed him, but because love, once given, never truly fades. Outside, the storm eased. Moonlight spilled through the window, glinting off her collarless neck, and she sighed softly. In her dreams, she saw the faces she loved. Sophie, Amelia, Mark, and though distance and time had taken them away, the warmth remained. For Daisy, hope wasn't something you held. It was something you lived. Daisy's new life began with a clean towel, a warm fireplace, and the gentle hum of a kettle boiling in the kitchen. The boy who had nearly drowned was named Oliver, and from the moment Daisy had pulled him from the water, he treated her not as a stray, but as someone who had already been part of his heart for years. He sat beside her that night, whispering softly while brushing the mud from her fur. "You're safe now, girl," he said, as though promising the universe itself. "You're not going back out there again." The house smelled of new paint and lavender cleaner, different from her old home, but still full of warmth. The mother, Helen, hesitated at first, unsure about keeping a dog. But when she saw the way Daisy followed Oliver from room to room, she relented with a sigh. "All right, but she sleeps inside. That poor thing's had enough of the cold." From that day on, Daisy belonged again. Mornings became her favorite time. She'd wake to the sound of the alarm clock upstairs, tail thumping softly against the rug. She learned the sound of Oliver's footsteps, light and hurried as he raced down the stairs to grab toast before school. She waited by the door every afternoon, eyes fixed on the lane until he came running back, school bag bouncing, calling out her name before even reaching the gate. At weekends, they went walking through the meadows, Oliver kicking his football ahead, while Daisy darted after it, tail wagging in full joy. For the first time in months, her world had rhythm again. But even in this comfort, the past lingered quietly. On certain misty mornings, when car tires hissed along the wet road, she would lift her head, ears twitching, as if searching for a familiar sound. Helen noticed once. "She's still waiting for someone," she murmured to her husband. "She'll learn she's home now," he replied. "It just takes time." Time did help, but love did more. Oliver adored her in the way only children can, unconditionally and fiercely. He read aloud to her at night, shared his crisps when he wasn't supposed to, and cried into her fur the day he got bullied at school. Daisy sat through it all, patient and warm, her heartbeat steady against his. She grew healthier, fur glossy again, eyes bright. The neighbors often stopped to greet her. "That's the hero dog, isn't it?" they'd say. Oliver would grin proudly. "Yeah, Daisy saved my life." For Daisy, though the title meant little, she didn't understand heroism. She only knew love. One winter morning, snow fell thick across the fields. The world turned silent except for the crunch of Oliver's boots and Daisy's paws as they played outside. He built a crooked snowman. She kept knocking the hat off, tail wagging furiously. Helen watched from the window, smiling. But as the months passed, another kind of change began to stir. Daisy was no longer the young, tireless pup she once was. Her muzzle started to silver around the edges, and she tired faster after runs. Oliver noticed. "She's getting old, Mom," he said one day, voice tinged with worry. "Just wiser," Helen replied, stroking Daisy's head. "We all slow down a bit, love." Still, Daisy's spirit never dimmed. Even when her legs ached, she would follow Oliver to the bus stop every morning, waiting until the bus disappeared, then padding home to Helen's gentle pat and a bowl of warm broth. Then, one spring afternoon, everything changed again. Helen was tidying the porch when a van pulled up outside. A man stepped out, a face worn by time, eyes heavy with something that looked like guilt. It was Mark, Daisy's old owner. He had come to the village on delivery work, unaware that the dog he'd once left behind still lived nearby. But fate has its ways. As he stepped out, Daisy froze mid-step on the path. For a moment, time folded in on itself. The smell of rain, the sound of an old car, the echo of a promise. Her body stiffened, then trembled. She took one hesitant step forward, tail low, ears flat. Mark's breath caught. "Daisy," he whispered, voice cracking. "Is that you?" Helen watched, confused, as the dog who had never barked at strangers suddenly began to whine, circling the man, sniffing, tail trembling between disbelief and joy. Oliver ran out from behind her. "Mom, what's happening?" Mark knelt, tears already in his eyes. "I thought I'd never see her again," he murmured, voice breaking. "I left her. I didn't know what else to do. We'd lost everything, home, job, couldn't feed her. I thought someone might take her in." Helen's face softened. The truth in his tone was enough. "Looks like someone did," she said quietly. For a long moment, Daisy simply pressed her head against Mark's chest, then looked up at Oliver, as if torn between two worlds. Mark sat on the gravel path for a long while, Daisy's head resting heavily against his knees. Her tail thumped gently, slow but certain, as though she were trying to reassure him that forgiveness had already happened long before this moment. The wind stirred through the hedges, carrying with it the faint scent of wildflowers from the meadow beyond. Oliver stood beside his mother, not sure what to do. "Mom," he whispered, "is she going to go with him?" Helen shook her head gently. "That's for her to decide, love." Mark lifted his gaze to meet hers. "She's yours now, isn't she?" Helen nodded. "Has been for years. But she never forgot, I think. Some dogs just remember everything." Mark ran a hand over Daisy's fur, roughened by age but still soft beneath his palm. "She used to wait by the road every day. I told her I'd come back. His voice cracked. "I didn't deserve her." Daisy looked up at him, eyes full of something deep and forgiving. Then she stepped closer, pressing her nose into his chest, tail wagging softly. Whatever words were left unspoken, she seemed to understand. Oliver knelt down beside them. "She saved my life," he said quietly. "She's part of our family now." Mark nodded, a tear slipping free. "Then she's right where she belongs." After that day, Mark visited often. He brought old photographs of Daisy as a puppy, of Sophie and Amelia, now grown. Helen invited him in for tea, and over time, the visits became less about guilt and more about gratitude. Daisy sat between them, content. One paw in the past, one in the present, heart big enough for both. Years passed softly, like the turning of pages in a well-loved book. Oliver grew taller, his voice deeper. Daisy grew slower, her steps measured, her muzzle almost white now. But her spirit never dulled. She greeted every morning with the same gentle wag, the same eagerness to be part of the day, no matter how small her part might be. On her 12th birthday, Oliver threw her a little party in the garden. There were balloons, slices of sponge cake, and a single candle stuck in a biscuit just for her. Mark came too, bringing an old red collar he'd kept all those years. "It still fits," he said softly, buckling it around her neck. "Looks like it was waiting for this day." The evening air was warm, filled with laughter and the smell of grass. Daisy lay between their chairs, eyes half closed, listening to the voices of everyone she loved. It didn't matter who she had belonged to first. What mattered was that she had never stopped belonging somewhere. That summer, Oliver left for university. He hugged her tightly before he went. "I'll be back soon, promise," he murmured, echoing a promise from long ago. Daisy licked his cheek and watched him drive away, her eyes calm. She'd learned by now that love never really leaves, it just changes shape. As autumn came, her walks grew shorter, but she still insisted on making it to the top of the meadow hill, where she could sit and watch the valley. Sometimes Mark joined her, sitting quietly beside her while the sun dipped low. "You taught me what loyalty really means," he'd say, and Daisy would nudge his hand as if to remind him that forgiveness was part of loyalty too. One crisp evening, Helen found her there on the hill, lying peacefully in the grass, facing the sunset. The air was cool, golden light spilling over the fields. Daisy's eyes were half closed, her chest rising and falling slow and steady. When Helen called her name, Daisy turned her head, tail giving one last, soft wag before she rested it on the earth again. She was gone by the time the stars came out. Quietly, gently, the way she'd lived. Oliver came home that night, and they buried her beneath the apple tree in the garden, where sunlight touched the ground first each morning. Mark placed her old red collar beside her, whispering, "You never gave up, did you, girl?" In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. A stray pup began visiting the garden. A golden one, small, with uneven ears and the same curious eyes Daisy once had. Helen laughed through tears. "Looks like someone sent a reminder," she said. Oliver crouched and let the pup sniff his hand. "We'll call her Hope," he said softly. And somewhere, in whatever quiet heaven dogs are given, Daisy would have wagged her tail.